My name is Nick B, and let's jump into the futures overview. So let's start with the economic calendar, right? We have a pretty quiet Monday. Tuesday, I'm looking for CPI at 8:30, probably going to get some volume there. Wednesday, we have core PPI, retail sales, manufacturing index, PPI, retail sales, all at 8:30 and 10:30. Crude oil inventories. That's going to be important. We're going to take a look at crude on this session too. Thursday, 8:30 unemployment claims. Okay, 9:15. I don't think this matters, honestly. Friday, 8:30 building permits. That doesn't matter either. Okay, so it's going to be a pretty interesting start to the week. Let's see the direction that we pick out because we have a few scenarios that could play out here. And as always, let's start with ES. Wow, okay, that's messy. Let me clean that up. All right. So we did break out last week. I mean, we're below the breakout now at 44.16. The breakout for me was 44.30. And as you guys can see in this channel here, I'm focusing on the previous lower highs of the trend on the daily. Here, I used to relay the levels that I was depending on direction off of these pivot points right here at 43.27, 46.30. Now, those are still important levels to consider here. I will mark them up, but I'm more focused on the lower highs and the lower lows of these areas here as support and resistance because in the meantime, I believe that's what's going to give us direction. So if we can clear and stay above 44.30, I think the next target for us should be 4,500 to 45.65, this area right here. But before that plays out, something that's happening here is we're forming a bit of a neckline. We are below the breakout point again. And if you look at it on the daily, this looks like an inverse head and shoulders forming. So we have the left shoulder here, the head, and then the right shoulder just has to form right here. So I have a pretty interesting idea of kind of what the setups could be. So let's go ahead and start plotting it out. First and foremost, I'm gonna go ahead and set these older lower highs just as navigation levels because if for whatever reason we end up dipping below 43.27, 43.25, this area right here, that's going to give us room definitely and confirmation possibly coming down to 42.40, the left shoulder here to complete the inverse head and shoulders possibly, unless this neckline holds in, breaks into Monday, we could get a continuation higher. So I just need these levels to kind of get an idea of what we might pick to do in terms of direction depending on the breakouts or breakdowns. One second, let me pull up. Also, if you guys have questions, I'm going to slow down. Um, Feel free to ask me in the futures chat and I'll answer them for you. I'll let you guys know once we get into that. But back to ES, right? So we have our navigation levels, I guess we'll call them, at 46.30 and 43.25 right here. Now, also, since we're on the daily and we do have this possible pattern playing out, I just want to mark it off here. I'm also going to change the color so that it stands out to us, so that we remember what we have them up. Because after you plot too many SNRs that are the same color, they kind of strain your eyes. So let's change them to white. We know that's just going to be a pattern here that could play out. Now, would I want to short from here, take a chance at shorting down? No, not necessarily, because don't forget also we have data coming up. I mean, Monday, it could be enough time for something to play out here, whether we retreat back to 43.25 or we even come down to 42.34, which is, it's not a stretch, it's a possibility. We don't know. And when we don't know, why guess, right? We don't need to guess. So let me break this down now to the 4 hour. And this is really the setup that I have in mind. I mean, yes, the 44.30 level is the breakout level that we had to continue higher, but because we did make these session highs at 44.34, I'm just going to set an alert for 44.35. And on a breakout of 44.35, we should have no issue going long and at the minimum targeting 4,500. That's going to be that psychological support resistance that's going to draw price action to it once we get that break and a confirmation of it, of course. So that's upside. Downside, we could, it's not a bad idea to maybe bite on a short, below 43.25, targeting 42.34. Our stop loss, honestly, 30 points at 43.50. 43.50 was a major level for us that when we finally got above it, I find it interesting that we came up to these areas here and we never really went below 43.50. So I think that would be a good marker that would invalidate, let's say if the breakdown's happening and we get in on the breakdown, and let's say for whatever reason reverses a break above, back above 43.50 would invalidate that move, and we probably end up either chopping between 44.30 and 43.25, or we end up attempting another breakout of 44.30. So that's one scenario there. Do I want to? Do I like it though? If I'm honest, not really, because again, anything can happen in between here. If we're looking for direction, I mean, the clear points of breakouts is either 44.30 and you end up going towards 4500 area, or you break below 42.34 and okay, you can take the short, be confident that you may be revisiting the lows of 41.22. Here, it really is a fine stretch of 50-50. If I'm honest, if I was to play, let's say, a short from these areas here, again, yes, the stop I would probably set to 43.50, and the first target to the downside would be 42.34. But I would be skeptical of the intraday levels if you're familiar with ES intraday, on the hourly, especially, well, during the day, during trading days, it likes to move in 20-point increments. So, we'd have to wait and watch for 4,300. Wait and watch for 42.80, wait and watch for 42.60, which again could not be a guarantee. We could just turn around on those levels. Again, something just to consider. This would be the more difficult trade, and I have to point out the different scenarios because it's right in front of us. So that's what we're looking at. What I said, you know what? I'm gonna set an alert at 43.25, and if we get there, oops, what am I doing? 43.25. And if we get there, we'll see what the momentum is looking like. If it's looking like, strong to the downside, the VIX is, let's say, elevated and we're breaking out on it, sure. Okay, we could maybe bite on a short. Why not? So that's what ES. 43.25 is our downside marker and 44.35 is our upside marker. I don't even need to break it down to the hourly. I mean, we can, but what are you really playing here? You're pulling back to, let's say on the hourly 44.12. If you break below 44.12, again, you probably have room to come down to 4400. That's going to be your psychological SNR. It's the 20-day EMA on the 1 hour for me. And below 4400, I mean, again, I'm not even going to front because, I don't even think 4400 would be strong enough. Really, a push below 4412, and it opens you up to the possibility of heading back down to 4360. That's just the channel that's carved here on the 1 hour. Again, can you play it? Sure. Is it worth it? Not really. I mean, you'd have to hawk it. So that's with ES. We don't need to break it down further. Let's move on to NQ. So NQ 2-year daily, yeah, this is it. Okay, so NQ similar. I do have a bearish channel, I guess a descending channel here, as well, pointing out the previous lower highs that we made. We made the highs over at 1670 more or less, then a lower high at 15.7, below 15.7. The next lower high was at 15.5 realistically. Well, it's 15.475, but 15.5 it just sounds better. And then our lower lows, the main support that's been kind of holding us up, and I was also looking at it previously in these areas when we were reaching the highs. It has some history. It has a lot of history to it. So what it tells us for sure is the previous pivot points, the spread between them, which created the channel if we wanted to see direction up or down, was, do we get a breakout of 15,270 or do we break back down below 13,750? That was our kind of channel that we're in. But all it serves now again is similar to what I said to ES as navigation levels, because the trend now formed here where we have new lower highs and lower lows that we need to break above in order to get a trend change, or if we want a continuation to the downside, all we have to do really is take out the previous higher lows at this level here. Is it possible? Sure, anything is possible. But right now, especially on NQ, it looks pretty good. The fact that we're holding 15.5 and especially above the pivot level of 15.269. So what does this tell me? Well, first and foremost, I have to point out 14.6 because that's still going to be our bottom line support that's essentially holding price up right now. Since we made the lows of 14.140 and got back above 14.6, I mean, price hasn't slowed down. So the question is, when it does slow down, where will it slow down to? Is it going to retest the descending trend line that we have going over here at some point, maybe at 15,000, 1550? Or do we see a pullback to 15,270 area and then we bounce out of there? I mean, we did that last week actually. Actually, we did that last week. So my next, I guess my next thought is, how will we hold up above really, 15,475? I want to say 15.5, but again, if we break below 15.5, the final straw for us is really going to be that 15,475 level. Below 15,475, we could be able to bite on the short. I have to break this down to the lower time frames to see the swings in between, but absolutely, we might be able to bite on the short and target 15,270 to the downside as a possibility. But let's see. So far, I'm more keen on, maybe finding a long entry at 15,475 or 15.5. And again, if we can remain above those levels, I would not mind going long again, like we did Friday, and ultimately seeing through our target of 15,700 being the first take profit. I had a feeling last week that around 15.6, that's when, we might slow down. Again, I wasn't a fan of holding our longs into the weekend because it's just a no-no. You just a traditional rule that I go by. No weekend holds because you can't account for whatever fundamentals events that might come out or whatever the kind of open on Sunday could come out. You can't kind of prepare for that. So let's see. We have a fresh slate and we'll look for an entry right now. I was thinking of marking these off. You know what? I'll mark off 15.7 and I'm going to make it green. So that's kind of basically going to tell us that this is our upside, our first upside target. Let's take a look at it on the 4 hour. Okay. Okay, so this is the level we want to stay above. 15, well, it's really 15,467 if you want to get technical. Now, I'm also going to go ahead and place an alert here because if we end up breaking below 15 excuse me 467, we're definitely probably going to have room to come down to 15,265. So at or below, let's do, yeah, that's fine. 14 15,465. Fine. Okay, so if we break below that, oh yeah, we could take that. We could take that all day. A break below. Whoa, what am I saying? Excuse me, I got thrown off. Right here, 15,465. We break below that. We could attempt the short coming down to 15,270. That's a possibility. Our stop would probably end up being, I would put the stop at maybe 15,520 because ultimately, if we get back above 15.5, that would invalidate the short. Possibility. I'm thinking about it, overall this is a breakout, so we'll have to see how we react around 15,465. We'll have to see that first before we do anything because very well we could come down here, bounce right off of it, and our upside is again 15,713. If we don't miss anything going on here, I think this is going to be our long entry. I rather look for long opportunities here than short, just because of the fact on the daily also we're above this descending channel. For us to really be looking at a possibility to go short again, I'd have to see a break below 15.2 ultimately, and then we can talk about this area right here where we had on the daily, we break 15.2. Okay, fine. We may be pulling back to, 1550, 15,000 area for a retest of the previous lower high. I mean higher lows, excuse me, higher lows in this area here. Now, let me see what NQ looks like on the 1 hour. Yeah, man, it looks like it's slowing down here. Oops. It looks like we're slowing down over here. So, again, let's see. I would before doing anything here just yet, I want to give, price action some time to develop, play out here. And again, we'll decide what we do if and when we get around this area. If we don't, if we, into Monday's open, we start going for the breakout of 15,610, I would not mind possibly attempting along there and targeting 15.7. Again, it's going to come down to in the moment what kind of momentum we have going on. What are the markets really looking like? What are the sectors looking like? If they're green, if they're pushing, okay, we can ride that momentum. But if it's kind of slow and we're getting that breakout of 15,610, I wouldn't quite trust it. I rather would probably sit out and wait for the move of a breakout of 15,700. Let's see, let's get a closer look. What's this right here? 15,720. Okay, so 15,720 is where I'm also going to set up my alert to the upside as well, in case we move any, in case we miss any entry on the lower end. But 15,720, a break of that, and I think you can easily, well, your first target is probably going to be 15,850. Yep, literally right here, these previous all-time highs. And then from there, you're really going to target 15.9. 15.9 would be the first real take profit to the upside from there. And depending what we do there, if we get a break of 15.9, we'll go to 16K. If we reject, we'll decide what to do there. But that's a ways away right now. We got to focus on what's happening right now. So again, I'm probably looking for a nice entry here. Again, if it doesn't come, that's all right. We'll reevaluate at 15,610 and we'll go from there. Right? It looks like we're kind of pulling up again. And again, you can look at this stuff on the 5-minute short-term frames as well, and it could kind of give you an idea of what might happen. But I wouldn't rely on it. I wouldn't really use it as analysis. I like the smaller time frames, like the 5-minute, to determine exits and entries on trades. I feel like it's pretty solid, and it helps with in the moment conviction of picking out, making a choice in that moment. So for example, on the 5-minute, I'm looking at this area right here. It looks pretty strong, bunched up, right? We even curved off of it just now. So what is that? 15,538. So if you get a break of 15,538, sure, again, you could definitely, short target those 38 points down to 15,5 possibly, but you're at such a high risk of it possibly not going your way. So that's the only kind of, thing that I'm careful with the 5-minute. Again, there's many ways to skin a cat, but I kind of moved past this because it kind of gave me long-term bad habits in trading where sometimes it would get so into my head with the scalping that I would just end up trading things that weren't there. So that's just something to keep in mind. Again, you could totally do whatever. There's no right or wrong. There's no right or wrong trading. So that's with NQ. So let me pull this up on the 2-year and just reiterate really quickly. So ultimately, I'd really like an entry long, possibly if we can keep above 15,465. If we break below 15,465, maybe, just maybe, we can bite on a short targeting, about 100 points, 150 points to the downside, maybe targeting 15,270, possibly even 15,200. Again, depends. We'll have to see how the market is moving, because right now we're not going to get really much. It's Sunday. We'll see at market open to Monday, and Monday might end up being slow too. It's whenever price action gets to these levels. So that's downside. And upside. Again, during the day, I'm watching for 15,610. If we can get a peak above that with good momentum and things are looking good, we're really seeing a true push. Sure, we can take a bite on that momentum and target 15.7 to the upside. Ultimately, a true breakout at this point, since we are above the previous lower high of 15,475 or 15,465. Because we're above that, technically we should be targeting 15,713 for direction. And if we want to go higher, we need to get above 15,713. 15,720, we placed our alert. Above that, we can easily target 15,900 as the second take profit. The first take profit we would watch for is 15,850, just in case price starts to stutter around there. It was the first previous all-time high in that area when price got back up there. That's a good marker that I like to use to determine my upside targets when we're breaking out. I like to look at previous all-time highs. It gives me an idea of what areas possibly may have had some history and possibly maybe some order blocks pick up over there, some buys or sells, and usually works out most of the time. So let's see what we get. That's NQ. We went over ES. Let's take a look at crude. Let me clean this up. I don't know what this was. This mumbo jumbo. Okay, it's too big of a time frame. Although, let me just plot this right here. And the reason is I'm looking at this area right here. What is that? Our 84, 82? Yeah, I'll leave that. I'm looking at this little shoulder here, as well as if you trace along, it comes right on the tops of these candles over here. A lower high over here at 77.47. Fine, we'll break that down to the lower time frame, but what do we have here? This is a lower low at 70.13. We pulled back up to 83, and then it came back down to 64 before coming back up to 83 again, and then back down. Okay, so this would be, I would probably put a level right here at 70.13 and probably at 64.42 because yeah, 63.60. No, that's like a whole dollar move. I'll probably target these lows first. Okay, just because I'm looking for the history and some kind of consistency in price action and what it previously had done, um, just to get an idea of what would be, some directional channels. And again, this is on the weekly, so it speaks volumes. The daily is pretty compressed. Oh, and look at that. What we plotted on the weekly, it kind of lines up perfectly to what's going on. The level that I pointed out also, which was 77. Yeah, roughly the 77, 78 level. Let me zoom in on that. 77.57. Okay, so let's do that. Extend to the left. Let's auto zoom. Okay. Okay, so what do we have? So nice. We just painted the picture. Okay. I have to point this out as well. So these were the previous lows that technically we've made on a technical aspect. If we're trying to point out, higher highs, higher lows, and lower highs, this would technically be the low, and this would be the start of a new high, and this is where our beginning higher low begins. Then we have our higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high. You get the point. So now what's happening is we're breaking below the previous higher highs as well as the previous higher lows. The first higher low I think that we ultimately broke below was this one right here, 88.32, stemmed us back down to 86.20. We went for the higher lows right here ultimately. Well, we created these higher lows. Yeah, excuse me, new higher lows at 81.58, 81.60. Then we began making our lower highs at 89.92. Again, lower lows. Once we took out the higher lows of 81.60, basically, that gave us a continuation to the downside to continue targeting the previous higher lows to continue making lower lows because this is a breakdown. I hope this wasn't too confusing. I'm also going to share in the futures chat with you guys what I mean when I'm talking about higher highs and higher lows. I think that's kind of important to pay attention to if you want to find trend and direction on a strictly technical sense. So let's look back to what's happening. So we are really breaking the previous higher lows of 77.57, a perfect breakdown down to 74.85, a retest of this area right here, and it looks like we're getting a continuation to the downside, although I can't trust it quite yet. One reason is because we are on the daily. I need to look at what's going on intraday. It might tell us a different story. If I didn't know any better on the daily also, this kind of looks like a bear flag. So as long as price action is squeezed in between this area here, and as long as we don't attempt to continue breaking down below 75 ultimately, at some point, if we continue to chop around this area, we might squeeze lower. The outlier is, I believe, Tuesday that we looked at it. We have crude inventory at 10:30, and that could definitely affect the direction we decide to take on. So we'll see what kind of opportunity we have in store for us on Monday, depending where price action is at. But mostly, I want to observe this for now. Although by the books again, this looks like a short. If I didn't know any better, I would set my stop, above. I would probably set it at 78, 78.20, and I would continue targeting down to 75 as the ultimate take profit for now. Also, I find it interesting 75 traces along pretty interestingly into this area where we kind of chopped around, and ultimately also on the weekly, excuse me, on the daily, as I was pointing out, this was the channel that we made the low at 67.70, and then the top of the channel in this case would be 74.55. Yeah, 70, 74, 70, 75 basically. Let's call it that, right? Let's round that number up. 75. So 75 to 60, 680. Okay, that would be the channel. So that's interesting. It all goes hand in hand. I am going to mark off the main things that I want for me to stand out in terms of direction, and that's going to be these levels right here because they basically isolate a floor for me. So I know for a fact that either when we're below this level, we're going lower, and I know for a fact that if we're above this level and we can stay above it, we're probably going to be testing the previous higher lows, excuse me, lower lows of what is this, 81.60, ultimately get above the pivot level of 84.82. But ultimately, if we can get above 84.82, that would give us room back up towards 90 ultimately. But let's see, let's see. So this would be not my bottom channel. I would say 75. No, I'm going to leave 75 alone for now. I'm going to mark off. I'm debating it. I don't know because you have the floor right here. No, you know what? I'm gonna make it 75. That's fair. I think that's a fair level right there. Make that yellow. Perfect. Okay. And yeah, I guess we don't need the lower level. It's kind of dirtying up our chart here. Well, yeah. I think it's a stretch if we end up going down, and I think ultimately, if we do end up breaking below 75, that's going to give us reason to come down towards the 70 area, and we'll take it from there. But again, we don't need to look at too much to the downside just yet. So let's break this down to the 4 hour. What do we have going on here? Okay, and it's a classic breakdown, retest, and possible continuation. I would short probably on a break of 75 first. Again, Monday probably we're going to end up just observing this for the most part, but I am going to create an alert at 74.90 to the downside. That's going to be our first marker where we can take a possible stab at shorting. Definitely our first take profit would probably be the 74 area. Below 74, we can target the previous lower highs of 72, 78, 73 area. Below 73, again, we can target the main floor, ultimately being 70. But again, if and when we get there, I wouldn't quite short here just yet because possibly if this ends up being a bear flag, it might chop a little bit. On the other hand, I think we can get a better entry as well. Now, if for whatever reason we get back above, let's see, this level 70, so I would say 78. Ultimately, I'm gonna go ahead and it's really 77.80. You know what? No, let's keep it 77.80. Let's keep it technical. So 77.80. If we get above 77.80, that gives us room now to head up towards what do we got? The first lower low of 80, probably coming up to 80, 81.46. Well, the top end of the channel is going to be 84.82. That's what I'd really target up here, or at least I target the previous lower highs of 82.25. I think that would be a fair target up here, as long as we can stay above 77.80. It is a bit messy though. I think I'd feel a lot more comfortable going long probably above 81.50 because now you're definitely entering into a channel where you have a floor that's certain of 84, 82, 85 area. I'm thinking. Let me see. Because I have to make it make sense. Something, I don't know, something didn't make sense to me about going long, maybe on a break of, you know what? No, that's fine. We can go long above 77.80 and probably our first take profit I would make 80. That would be fair. Our stop loss I would probably set it at 77.40. That would be fair considering that level we were just watching on the 1 hour where the true breakout is at 77. Well, right here, 77.57. Yeah, so that's perfect. 77.40 gives us some leeway, some room. Also on the 1 hour, 77.45 is the 100-day EMA. So that makes sense. That would be a fair stop loss. Okay, so again, let me reiterate, 77.40 stop loss on a breakout of 77.80, and your first take profit would be 80. That's a good setup right there. Had to think about that for a second. Had to piece it together. Now, downside again, downside on crude. If you're a brave soul, you can short up here, and you have your stop literally at 78, or yeah, I would have my stop at 78, and you could short here and ultimately target 75 to the downside. You're a brave soul, but it's very back and forth. I attempted a short last week, around below, I think even 76, and wrote it out for a few points and got out, and it just so happened to flip around. So this is definitely a bit of a chop range, and again, as I mentioned on the daily, it could pan out to be a bear flag. So I would like the bit of a more confident directional trade on this. So below 74.90, that's below the 75. I think we can easily target the first lower high of probably 73.85, below 73.85. Let me move this back to the 1 hour. Nope, 4 hour. 1 hour is not showing us enough. Yeah, so below 73.85, which would be this area right here, we could probably end up targeting 72.60. So let's see. Let's see again, keeping in mind Tuesday's crude oil inventories at 10:30. And last but not least, I think I wanted to look at gold, GC. I believe there was a setup coming up on there as well. We could take a look at last week's call out. Pretty much played out very well when we broke below 1975, and the first target, where I mentioned could have been 1950, went played out exactly like that. Let me clean this up. And we'll basically draft it from scratch. So pull this up on the 2-year daily, and let's start identifying the floors that we may be in. So let me see. I gotta point this out right here. This 2019-30 level right here. Then we have, well, the previous lower lows of 1901. I don't want to make this too messy, so we could put this one right here. Okay, so if we end up below 1901, gives us room to come down to 1823. As long as we're above 1901, oops, went dark on my screen up there. As long as we're above 1901, I mean, we have room to fluctuate basically all the way towards 2000, maybe even 2019, 2023. My bad, guys. Screen on top just went out. Looks like I'm in a dark cave. I need to turn it on. It's bothering me. Okay. Okay. So we kind of identified the channels that we're in. Let's take a look at what's going on intraday. So this stands out to me right here, 1980. I don't get it. My bad, guys. It's just I need to get the screen on. Okay. Okay. Back to it. So intraday. This level right here, 1990 basically. Oh, excuse me, I got thrown off. I didn't mean 1990. This one, 1980. I need to mark that off here. We used that level previously before as a kind of directional level for us. We knew that if we can get above 1980, we probably would begin to have room to attempt to take aim at 2019, 2023. I believe that's where our last breakout alert was that we had before I erased it. So I need to mark these off as well because these are the only levels that are going to tell me we're really getting a direction on GC. And again, GC doesn't move that much, but again, if we can get above 2019-30, it's going to give me a green light that we can definitely go long, targeting the previous all-time highs of 2050. Above 2050, we're going to look at 2063. I'm looking at these all-time highs here. Above 2063, we have room to 2085.40. And again, below this floor right here of 1901, that just opens us up to coming down towards 1880. Below 1880, also why I chose 1880, I'm looking at these previous higher lows right here. And as well, there's some history to it previously to the downside as a lower low as well. So 1980 would be the first stop below 1900. Below that, I would probably look at 1866. Below 1866, you're definitely looking at 1857.30. Below 1857.30, you have this gap filled down to 1848. Below 1848, your floor is at 1823.40. So you're gonna have to kind of monitor it. But these are, I guess, the only setups that I see in the moment. And I'm gonna set the alerts right now. 1 second. Okay, so we need a break of 1901. So I'm gonna set it. Yeah, 1901 is fine. I'll set my alert to the downside there for a short, and then to the upside, I would probably set it. I was thinking of setting it to 1980, but I'm going to check GC out on the hourly right now. I just need it to make sense. At least, you know what? Let me point out the directional breakouts that we get. So a breakout of 2019.30, and then you can target long 1950 easily. So let's go ahead and adjust this 2019. 30. That's going to be our upside breakout target. And we break out above that. Again, we're looking at, 2050. Really, it's going to be 2050. We're looking as the ultimate upside target. Everything in between, let's take a look if it's worth it. If it's worth doing anything in between here, because again, as long as we're below 1980, we have room to continue heading back down lower. Again, first stop, especially now that we're below 1950, I think our first stop to the downside could end up being 1920. Let's see. Let's see what the hourly tells us. Okay, so this stands out to me right here because last time we couldn't break above it once, but once we did, we retested and then continued on higher. And what is that level? Your 1946 level. Okay, something really interesting I just spotted too. So let me go ahead and plot this here. I'm also going to make it a different color. I'm going to make it white. White, why? Because it's insignificant. I want the SNRs on the hourly to be kind of insignificant. Again, I'm not a fan of dirtying up the chart too much, so if I can avoid placing kind of useless support and resistance, I do. I try to look for something that really catches the eye and makes sense. So for example, this level caught my eye because we made this top at 1946.50, and after we broke out, we had this little retest zone that we came down to before going higher, and then the next time we came down to that area, we were able to fend it off. The bulls were able to fend it off back up to 1971. But because we weren't able to clear the previous lower highs to make higher highs, the trend continued lower, and we ended up breaking below the previous lower lows, making new lower lows at 1936. So this was a breakdown, and it's perfect. We broke down 1946 basically. Oops. We broke down below 1946, retested the breakdown basically, more or less. And now, in theory, again, similar to crude, we could continue lower, but I rather wait for if we want a short GC. I think I'd rather wait for a break of 1937, and I think you shouldn't have an issue targeting 1920. 1921 as the first take profit, and below 1920, ultimately, you're probably going to end up at 1901. So that's a possibility. Oh, I don't like what I just did there. I'll explain right now my thought process to that why. Because on the hourly, I'm I'm taking a chance on this direction because again, it could flip, right? I am paying attention to the technical levels, but when I pull this up on the big picture, we know that as long as we're in between, the channels of ultimately excuse me, this is on the 1 hour. Let's pull this back up on the daily. We know, well, daily's not even good enough. I'm sorry guys. I'm all over the place. On the 4 hour, this makes more sense. You can clearly see the channel that we're ultimately in, and it clearly basically tells me that as long as we're in between it, you're not really getting directional trades. You may think you are, depending on the previous lower highs and higher highs that you're breaking out of and breaking down on the hourly, but I don't like the consistency there. Again, it has to do something with certainty too, because you don't have that here. It kind of, especially on the higher time frames, on the 4 hour for sure. It, I trust it more in terms of direction. So if we break below 1901, I know for a fact we're going to end up going lower because it's a breakdown. You're breaking below a floor ultimately. And then if we break above 2019-30, it's a breakout. I know that, you have that room to the upside. What we have going on here in between, again, sure, there is, and again, this is going into now personally my trading style. So you're getting a look at that and why I'm thinking the way I think, because you're not really getting true direction here because it could reverse anyhow it wants. I mean, look at how we ended up, bouncing off of these levels here after making these lows here, and then we had a sharp rise. If you're trying to catch each of these swings up and down, I don't like the consistency there because you kind of have to end up hawking price action, and that feels like a chore. I don't want that. I want to know that I'm breaking out, and I know that direction is going to end up going higher, or we're breaking below and we're ending up, heading lower. Here in between, man, I'm gonna say again, there's many ways to skin a cat, and again, you can definitely bite on this short here. You could set a stop at, I would set it at 1955, and you can target the short. First take profit being 1920, and then second take profit being at 1901. You can do that now, but but there's a 50-50 because what if overnight, there's one of two things that can play out, one of three things that can play out. Either we end up chopping overnight, come Monday, we break above and you get stopped out, or we end up chopping overnight and at some point you end up rejecting and we end up heading lower into Monday, possibly. Or, again, we might not even end up chopping. Maybe overnight, come 2 a.m., 3 a.m., usually I see bids in the equity markets come out of nowhere. Maybe we get bids to the upside, and again, overnight you get stopped out. I feel like we've been playing that game for far too long, and I don't think I want to take my chances on that, at least with GC here. Again, it looks like a clear breakdown, definitely, but I just remembered on the 1 hour, considering the channel that the floor that we're really in between, I don't know if I'd like to take that chance here because, this thing can flip around too into tomorrow. There's not much stopping it from doing that. We are what, 2 points, 46. We're $2 away from that breakout level. I don't think I want to take my chance there. That's my personal reasoning for that here. It's just, again, I feel like I'm going back to my thoughts where I've been burned before trying to chase direction on the 1 hour intraday and then it ending up flipping on me because on the big picture you're really just in a massive corridor. And also the other thing is, um, yeah, I've traded gold in the past, but I feel like I also need to spend a little bit more time. This is something, gold is something I definitely picked up into 2023. Previously I didn't spend too much time on it, but now that I am, I just need to get a little bit more familiar with the price action here. And because of that personal fault, again, I don't want to push my luck. But once I do get a little more familiar here as well, where I kind of know how price action is going to behave, I could take that stab there. I believe Nick DiGiacomo, he's pretty good with gold. He spent a lot of time, I think, sitting on gold, so he would be comfortable enough to weigh on. But again, this is just my thoughts, my trading style, and my approach to at least what I'm seeing, what's in front of me. If you guys have any questions, let me know. Other than that, I think, we're gonna wrap it up. I mean, I feel like it's been a good futures overview. But if you guys have any questions or want me to take a look at something specifically, guys, let me know in the future chat. I'll take a look at it. I'll give you a minute. But other than that, we're looking forward to a good week, a good trading week, hopefully. Let me check. Yes, yeah, it's still hanging out at 44.17. Let's see. NQ still, yeah, we might end up chopping. might end up chopping. It's kind of it's slowing down here. So let's see. Last but not least, VIX. Right, VIX ended up lower at 1423. That's crazy. That's ultimately also what helped us get that push on Friday. If VIX ends up pulling back up to 15. Really, 15 is the marker. If we get above 15, we go for this gap fill here. We might end up seeing that pullback on equities. But anything goes. We'll have to wait and see if, again, VIX decides to end up heading lower into Monday's open. We may get a continuation in price action. We might end up breaking out above the session highs of 44.35 on ES and what was it, 15.610 on NQ. But other than that, yeah, that's all she wrote. Thank you for joining, and catch you guys into the week. Cheers.